Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this, the Patchwork hustings of General Election 2015. It's good to see you all here. It's good to see our distinguished panel members. I hope they're going to be tested severely over the course of the next hour or so. That is your job, and I'm here to help you do that. It is always a good time. It is always a good time to look at what's happening in politics. It is, after all, our politics. These are the guys that we choose, that we elect, that we send to Westminster to do the job for us, but it belongs to us, and we should not forget that at any given time. It is an acutely interesting time in this present general election campaign. I came here to KPMG from Manchester, fresh from Manchester, watching Chuka's party launch the Labour Party manifesto. Tomorrow it's the Conservative Party, day after we hear from the Liberal Democrats and UKIP. This morning there was Ed Miliband accusing the Conservative Party of being the party of irresponsibility, the party of reckless spending promises, warning that you cannot fund the NHS with IOUs. Tomorrow I fully expect to hear David Cameron, Chris Grayling, no doubt on the platform beside him, nodding approvingly and clapping enthusiastically, telling us that the Tory party is the party of the NHS. Now, I'm no prude, Lord knows, but all of this cross-dressing I find just a little bit shocking. Ed, of course, he gets his turn, and the Liberal Democrats get their turn on Wednesday. They'll be telling us that you can't do anything with these other two guys unless he's part of the picture. You decide, you'll have to decide whether that's a good idea or not. This election campaign is unlike any that I've ever seen before, and the result may be unlike any we've ever known. It is just possible, sorry guys, that the mould of 2- and 3-party politics may just be about to be broken for good. For good or for worse, that remains to be seen. It's good for trade if you're a journalist, whether it's good for the country again, another matter altogether. There's a range of choices facing us all as voters in this coming general election, which is, again, not quite like any that we've seen before, which could in turn lead to deal-making and deal-breaking, to backstabbing and betrayals after the election before anyone gets to form any kind of government. All very interesting to watch, but of course the risk is that once that process gets underway, the people who sent our MPs to Westminster start to feel excluded from the entire process, and the disillusionment that then we see at the moment begins to set in ever more deeply. It is a problem. We're talking perhaps of partnerships in politics, which may make sense. Compromise is a good thing, people will often say. Sometimes after a very short period of time, when it's taken into practice in politics, it looks like betrayal to so many people. We're on a learning curve with this new politics, and in many ways there's a good deal more ground to cover before we get used to it. I think a good deal more ground to cover. So the problem is to get people interested, and there's a big problem with that. We've seen people turning away in huge numbers from the entire business of politics. People aren't voting. They don't trust our politics. They don't trust our politicians. It's especially true of young people. It is extra especially true of our ethnic minorities and of more deprived communities in rural and in inner city areas. And that's where Patchwork comes in. Patchwork is about trying to reach the people that I'm talking about and persuade them to get involved. So the job is to connect people with the politics, our politics, well, over the time that remains in this election and way beyond that. The job of these guys is to persuade us that it's worth putting our trust in them. And shortly I'm going to be asking them to make a statement, each one at a time, of why all of us should give their party the nod come election day. Then we're going to open up the floor. There'll be questions to the panel. All of you are invited to take part. Stick your hands in the air. We want to hear what you want to hear from these guys on the platform. So we're going to hear what they do. Connection, it's about connection. On Sunday I had Joey Essex on my show, just to mention in passing. It was striking to see how the politicians were falling over themselves to get on Joey Essex's good side. Maybe just want to get their faces on the Joey Essex documentary, which is in the making. They need to be careful. I'm not sure it's going to work out quite as well for the politicians on the show as they might like to think. There's got to be a better way, though, than sucking up to Joey Essex. And one of those ways is to answer some questions as well as we hope they will. Before we move on to the business end of this evening, a thank you to KPMG, the sponsors of tonight's event, and especially Simon Collins, the head partner who's made this happen. Remember, tweet away like crazy. We want to see your tweets going out there. At UK Patchwork, that is the hashtag. Put your phones on silent while you're doing it. That can be embarrassing. I've done it in a few news conferences from time to time. Extraordinarily unprofessional. Welcome to the Patchworkers here, the Uprisers from Uprising, the Parliamenters from 3FF, community organisers from Citizens UK, the mentors from Mosaic, the students from Westminster Academy and Brondesbury College and various community stakeholders all here in the room. And you'll note that all of our panelists have been asked to write a short article which you can see published very shortly on the Times Online, the RedBox section of the website. I've already mentioned the hustings on my programme on Sunday morning and hope to do so again. I've mentioned it in a blog on the Huffington Post that I've written today. I do my bit to plug the event because it matters. We all know that it matters. We're going to see very shortly why it matters. So just before we kick on, welcome again to all of you. I'm going to invite Sadiq Musa from KPMG, a partner in the firm, just to come and say a few words. Sadiq.
I want to start off by welcoming you to KPMG's UK headquarters here in the heart of Canary Wharf. And I want to thank our three panellists. Apparently I can't call you MPs, but three panellists that are representing our three main political parties. I want to thank John for comparing the event tonight. And most of all, thank you for making the time to attend, especially the two schools that are attending. I hope that you enjoy the event and play a real full part in the proceedings tonight. So, as I said, this is the UK headquarters of KPMG. We have 7,000 staff that work in this building, providing audit, tax and advisory services to businesses to support and generate economic growth. Growth that will be good both for the UK and growth that will be good for in global terms. This may be our headquarters, but we also are represented in 22 of the major cities in the UK. And I myself am based in the most important city of them all, which is Manchester, which, as you would know if you follow football, we're quite used to looking down at London from the top of the Premier League. Okay, I do accept that this year is a bit of a blip, but it will be serviced back to normal next year, I'm sure. We're also very international. We have offices in almost every country in the world, and we employ about 150,000 people in our international network. And Simon Collins, who John mentioned, would very much like to have been here to make this welcome, but he's in the air at the moment flying to a meeting in Seoul, South Korea. So why are KPMG hosting this event? Well, we're passionate about encouraging diversity in the workforce, and we want KPMG to be representative. We want the staff that work for KPMG to be representative of the local communities and a vast number of communities, like I said, we operate in. We want our staff to be representative of the communities in which they work. And we want KPMG to be open and accessible. And I know that we need to do more to make ourselves more accessible and more open. And that is why only last week KPMG announced a new apprenticeship program called KPMG 360, which is to give opportunities to school leavers, college leavers from diverse backgrounds an opportunity to make a career at KPMG. No longer will these youngsters require a university education to have a career at a firm like KPMG. That is also why we sponsor the City Academy and why we work with 100 schools nationally, working with youngsters in some of our most challenging and challenged communities in order to better prepare them for the world of work and the world of business. And the importance of diversity and a diverse workforce to KPMG was amplified recently by Simon Collins. Simon became the first chairman of a professional services firm to set specific targets that we would need to hit for diversity by 2018. So, for example, he said that by 2018, 7% of our partners and 9% of our partners and 14% of our directors will be from the BME community. He's also set specific targets for senior staff representation by gender, by sexual orientation and by disability. Another aspect of diversity and encouraging diversity in the workforce is fairness in pay, and KPMG have championed the living wage. Not only do we insist the living wage is paid to our staff, but we insist that any contractors that want to do business with KPMG pay their staff the living wage. So, as I said, the need to ensure diversity is the right thing to do, and as good corporate citizens, you would expect us to do this. But much, much more important than that, I believe that by recognising and nurturing all the talent within the communities within which we operate, we will build a much more successful KPMG. And I think that that also goes for the communities. The strongest communities are the ones where people from diverse backgrounds are involved in civic society and also involved in politics. And although we at KPMG are absolutely politically neutral, we encourage our people to air their views fully and to get involved in the political process, regardless of their background. As I said, that involvement is a better way of building a better society. However, I also think it helps build trust in our institutions and in politics, which, like trust in business, has been severely dented over the last few years. That's why it's a great pleasure and a great privilege for us to work with an organisation like Patchwork, who encourage young people from all sorts of backgrounds to involve themselves in the decision-making process and in politics. And we share the values that Patchwork hold dear. Like the business world, we also believe that politics should never be the preserve of the few. And we're also delighted that John Holt, one of our senior partners, has actually joined Patchwork as an ambassador. And because of the work that they do in promoting diversity, in promoting open access, and in building stronger communities, that is the reason why Simon Collins was very keen that KPMG hosted this event. So that's all I want to say at the moment. I hope you enjoy the evening. And as they say, Mr. Pienaar, let the debate begin.
So, into the question time session. I'm going to begin by asking each of our panellists to briefly just set out their stall, just to tell us, just in the course of a couple of minutes each, why their party is the party for the underrepresented communities in particular that Patchwork is involved in. I'm going to start by inviting Chris Grayling to say a few words.
Thank you to Patchwork for hosting this event tonight. Thank you to KPMG. I spent this weekend in the somewhat unusual position for a Conservative of rooting for the Reds to beat the Blues, which they did. So why Conservative? We've spent the last 5 years in government trying to secure a better future for you, your family, and for this country. And I think, I have to say, I spent the first 2.5 years of the Parliament's Employment Minister. And I used to stand in front of groups of young people when I talked both in my own constituency and elsewhere, back in those months after 2010, talking about employment prospects, with a degree of trepidation. Because at that point, we had 2.6 million, more than nearly 2.7 million people unemployed. We had more than 1.5 million people claiming job seekers allowance. And it was going to be tough for young people getting into the labour market. 5 years on, I have a very different conversation. We have got unemployment in this country way below what it was in 2010. The number of people claiming job seekers allowance has almost halved in the past 3 years. It's its lowest level since 1975, 40 years ago. We have the fastest growing economy in the Western world. And I think the opportunities for young people in this country have increased exponentially in the last 5 years. We've gone from a position where the job market was tough to a one where there is a real demand from employers for good young people. And I want to see that work continue. Our long-term economic plan has taken us so far, but there's a way to go further. We have aspirations to make this country the biggest, the best, the most successful economy in Europe. I want to see us grow and develop new technologies, new businesses. It's really exciting to see how many people from BME backgrounds, young people, have taken advantage of government schemes to start their own businesses. We've seen 200,000 young people from the BME communities take up apprenticeships, and well done to KPMG for being part of the apprenticeship initiative. I feel this country is on the right track. And the question I think all of you have to ask yourselves is, if we have a change of government after this general election, do you actually believe that progress, are you certain that that progress will continue? I think we're moving in the right direction. I think this country has great prospects ahead of it. And I think this is not the moment to change the direction in which we're heading. But the other bit that I'm also proud of is that the Conservative Party is a party that has changed massively over the last generation. We have BME councillors, candidates, MPs, cabinet ministers, government ministers. I've had people from different minority communities working alongside me in the Ministry of Justice, where I'm Secretary of State. We have the Conservatives' first Asian cabinet minister in Sajid Javid. We have a whole range of great new candidates standing for election this time, who I hope and believe will be elected and really strengthen the presence of your communities in my party in the House of Commons. And that is, I think, a real positive step forward. And I hope the message it sends to all of you, because those of you who have been part of the Patchwork initiatives are there because you believe in, are interested in politics. This is something you can all do. You can all be part of. I would encourage all of those who are conservative-minded to be with me and with my party in May. But above all, what I'd say to all of you is, regardless of which of the three of us you say tonight represents the party for you, do cast your votes. Your votes make a difference. It's really important that you are all part of our democracy. You will be helping shape the future of our country.
Chris Grayling, thank you very much indeed. Next up is Labour's Shadow Business Secretary, Chuka Umunna.
Well, just on that last point that Chris mentioned, I just want to pay tribute before I say what I want to say to Patchwork. I never tire of quoting Martin Luther King, and I've done this several times over the last couple of weeks, but he always said, the power is never given, you have to take it. And what Patchwork does is help all of you take the power and encourage you not only to vote, as Chris said, but actually to get involved with this whole political process. And I've seen that I've had the Patchwork Massive down to Lambeth, helping to campaign in my neck of the woods and understand what politics is all about. But what you do is fantastic, and this event tonight's testament to it. Look, we talk a lot about, in politics, about policies, and that's right, about the how and the what we're going to do. But I just want to tell you something about the why. I'm trying to persuade you, if you're casting your vote for the first time, to vote Labour, and I just want to tell you why I joined the Labour Party and why I got involved with it. And essentially, the reason I joined the Labour Party is because I don't subscribe to a me, myself and I kind of politics that says that it's every man in it for himself and we let individuals just struggle on alone. Ultimately, if we want to empower people to achieve their aspirations and dreams collectively, together as a community, we have to give people a platform upon which they can succeed. And it doesn't just apply to the individual, by the way. I think it applies to our nation too. We're a great nation with people with great talents, but we're competing in this big global world. You've got the KPMG partner in another part in Seoul. These are the people that we're competing with. If individually and as a country we want to meet these challenges, we have to do it together. And that is why I completely reject the politics of some other political parties which seek to set different groups up against each other, scaremonger, and inevitably stoke division. Because division's not going to get us anywhere. And, you know, we see rising Islamophobia at the moment, rising anti-Semitism. That isn't the way that we're going to be able to make it in this new era that we're in. We can only do that together. And together, what we will do, if we are elected on May the 7th, is, frankly, open up the world so that you can benefit from it. So if you want to go to university, you're not there yet, you've got some of the pupils here, we're going to cut your tuition fees from 9 to 6k because we don't think you should have that erected as a roadblock to you going to university. Or, if you want to go and do an apprenticeship, if you get the grades, we're going to guarantee you an apprenticeship. If you want to start a business, we're going to reform our banking system so you can get access to the finance that you need to expand and grow that business. And look, if you fall on hard times, we're not going to punish you for that. So we're going to abolish nasty, horrible things like the bedroom tax, which frankly hit people hard who are down on their luck. But I'll just finish by saying this. I don't just want you to vote for the Labour Party, I actually want you to join it, get involved and stand for political office. Look at this panel here, it's a bunch of blokes. If we want a modern politics that actually looks like modern Britain, we can't do it unless you guys get involved. So please do put that cross by the Labour Party when you're voting, but actually join, stand for elected office and make this look like modern Britain, because we're not there yet. Thanks very much, Doc.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Chuka, very much indeed for that contribution. It went down well with sections of the audience, as you've heard. But let's not go too far in trying to put bald men in suits entirely out of business. There is still a place in society for the rest of us. I'm going to invite now Ed Davey, the Liberal Democrat Climate Change Secretary, to say a few words.
brilliant work by Patchwork yet again. So thank you for all you do, not just tonight, but all over the years. It's really very important work. Like Chuka, I actually want to tell you why I joined the Liberal Democrats. I joined them in 1989 when we were 4% in the opinion polls. So 8% is looking fantastic at the moment. And when I joined them at 4%, I didn't join them because I thought I was going to become an MP. I didn't join them because I thought I was going to be a minister. I joined them because of ideas, values, principles. That's what changes our world. And it's those values that then feed into policies and action to really make a huge difference. And that liberalism, which is the heart of my party's values and principles, is what inspired me then and inspires me today. And let me give you a sort of smorgasbord of those Liberal Democrat principles. Things like human rights and freedom. Things like internationalism. Things like the importance of the environment. Things like equality of opportunity through education, opportunity for all. Things like making sure we build a stronger economy so we can afford a better health service, afford the police, and we can tackle poverty. Those types of values are what inspired me then, and they inspire me now. And do you know what? I'm proud that in government we've been able to deliver on many of those values. Yes, we've been working with Chris's party, and by the way, we don't share a lot of their values, but we do some. And by coming together and working with other people, even when it's difficult, you can make really big differences. I'm really proud of the role that Liberal Democrats have played in making sure we kept the Human Rights Act, which people in Chris's party weren't so keen on. I'm really proud of the fact that on internationalism, this country is now spending 0.7% of GDP, the first country in the G7 to do it. I'm not convinced that would have happened if Liberal Democrats weren't in the coalition. I'm really proud on the environment. We've trebled almost the amount from renewable electricity. No one thought that possible. We've done that. My first day in office, I had a letter from 100 MPs, mostly Conservatives, telling me not to do onshore wind. I ignored it, and we've gone ahead with renewable electricity because climate change is really important. We need to help not just people in this country tackle climate change, but people around the world who are more vulnerable to it. I'm really keen on our policy on called pupil premium, to get more money to the most disadvantaged children at the early stage of their career, when you can make the biggest difference to equality of outcomes and to making sure you're really helping the people who need it the most. And I'm really proud of things like increasing the tax allowance, taking 3 million of the low paid out of income tax altogether, a Liberal Democrat policy. I'm really proud of the massive expansion of apprenticeships, 2 million, which Vince Cable drove through. So I think we've delivered on a lot of our values. We weren't able to deliver on all of them, not least tuition fees, because we were in a coalition. We had a negotiation. And that's the sort of new politics that we are dealing with, John, because I don't think anyone's going to win this election. I don't think we're going to win another coalition. And there's going to be negotiations and compromises, and not everyone's going to like that. But that doesn't take away from the underlying passion and values that many politicians like me have. And having been an MP now for 18 years, working with my constituents, it's made me even more passionate. My constituency acts in Kingston-Surbiton. It sounds like it's homogeneously white. It isn't. We have the largest Korean population anywhere in Europe. We have a huge Tamil Gujarati population. We've got a Gurdwara, we've got a mosque. We've got, on a Saturday morning, we have a Hebrew school, a Gujarati school, a Tamil school, a Korean school, an Arabic school. And working for those different constituents, those different communities, has really taught me the importance of diversity. Not just because we can celebrate it because we're a stronger society if we're more diverse, but you know, we're also a stronger economy. The creativity, the ideas that comes from diversity is making us stronger. Now, Liberal Democrats in this particular election fight, yeah, we're the underdogs. Yeah, we're the underdogs, we get that. But I tell you, we are going to struggle for those votes, and we're going to win a lot more votes than people expect when they hear not just our manifesto, but our values. And you know what? I think when people realise that there's going to be another balanced parliament, that politicians are going to have to work together, Chuka talked about together, well, actually, I think people want political parties to work together. I think coalitions can really work. The last 5 years has shown that they can, and I think that actually represents more people in our country rather than just a small section that voted for one particular party. So coalitions are diverse, and that diversity is strength.
sincerity rings through in everything that it says, as it has from Chuka, as it has from Chris. But the Lib Dems are concerned, they're often accused by their critics of doing anything, saying anything to get into office for the joy of power. I can testify that since they've been in office, they've barely had a moment's joy. It has been something close to misery most of the time for the Liberal Democrats, and maybe deserve some sort of tribute for that. We're going to go to the question session now. The first one to get us started, and then I'll be asking and inviting questions from you guys from the floor. The first question is this, just to get us started. I know, and you know, we all know that whoever wins the election, and none of us has a clue how that's going to pan out. It's going to lead to spending cuts and severe ones. It's going to lead possibly to tax increases, and quite possibly both. Exactly what's going to happen, you may know, but you're not telling us. Here's the question, is it too much to ask for just a little bit more frankness before we cast our votes? I don't say honesty, maybe a bit more frankness. Start with you, Ed.
Well, Liberal Democrats are publishing detailed costing plans for our manifesto, and we're challenging the others to do likewise. We're saying where the tax rises will have to be, because we do think there are going to have to be some tax rises if we're going to continue to sort out the deficit. I don't think you can do it all by spending cuts. If you do it all by spending cuts, that's going to lead to a lot of unfairness in society. But yes, there will need to be some spending cuts too, because you can't do it all by tax rises. You need a balanced approach, and that's what Liberal Democrats are arguing. And through a costed manifesto, setting out where the money will come from, I think we're showing that. We've made it clear we're going to balance the budget by April 2018, and then we're going to allow spending to increase as the economy grows. That enables us to spend more than the Conservatives are proposing, because we've got tax rises, and we're going to allow spending to increase after April 2018 with the growth of the economy. So we'll spend more than Conservatives. I think if they cut so much, it will harm the economy. But we're actually going to borrow less than Chuka and the Labour Party, because we do think we really do have to get this deficit down and balance the books.
I'll ask for brief contributions so we can cover the ground during the course of the time that's available to us. Chuka, Umunna.
Well, we actually wanted, because of the issue that you raised, the Independent Office for Budget Responsibility that the government set up to actually audit everybody's plans. And so they would pass judgment and give a view to you to say whether our sums add up. But unfortunately, I don't know whether Liberal Democrats were on this, but certainly the Conservative part of the coalition didn't want that to happen. If we're elected on May the 7th, we'll do that. So in the future, you actually have an independent outfit looking at everybody's policies and saying what this means. There's two things, or three things actually. Part of our challenge, I suppose, certainly as an opposition, is we're not in government at the moment, so we don't know everything that's in the books. It's a bit like if you're buying a business. I used to work on commercial transactions. Until you've done all the due diligence into the paperwork and the different liabilities and assets of a company, it's quite hard to really work out exactly what your plans will be as a business. But what we have done is set out, first of all, our approach, which is that ultimately, if we want to deal with our debt and our deficit as a country, if we want to balance the books, we've got to make sure people earn more, because if they earn more, they're paying more in income tax and national insurance, and that goes into the exchequer that can then be used to reduce the debts and then invest in people and our infrastructure, etc. Secondly, I think it is fair to ask the people who've done very well to make a bigger contribution, the top 1%. And thirdly, there are going to be spending reductions in different departments. But look, there isn't one way of spending £740 billion, and I believe there is a fairer way of doing so.
Okay.
So that's just giving our general approach there.
Okay. Chris Grayling, please.
Okay, well, I think we have actually given details. We've set out a detailed plan. It's been assessed by the Independent Institute of Fiscal Studies. It involves government saving £1 in every 100 that it spends over the next 2 years to take us to a point where we can not only get our nation's finances back to balance, but actually start to generate some money for a rainy day as well. There's a whole variety of ways in which we're going to end up doing that. Let me just give you one example from my own department. We are in the process of a major programme of modernisation of our courts. We ought to move away from a situation where in a courtroom you have huge bundles of paper, you have inefficiency, you have a lack of video links, so you have a police officer sitting around a court all day waiting to give evidence. We are, over the next 2 or 3 years, going to be digitalising our courts. It will save about £150 million a year, but it will also create a much better environment for victims, for witnesses, and for all those who work in our courts. It's about doing it smarter.
Thanks very much indeed, Chris. Now, it's your question time, so it's over to you.
How are you going to reduce the stress on people who work in the public sector, who work so hard every single day, but yet more and more and more is being taken from them, and it's getting ridiculous?
Okay.
Well, my answer is that we've actually protected the core school budgets, we've protected the health service budget. Not only that, we're continuing to increase spending on the health service because it is a very important part of the public sector. It is under pressure because of the ageing population. We're all living longer. Everyone in this room has a much better expectation of a long life than their grandparents did. That is a good thing, but it also brings enormous pressures for the public sector, as does the fact we're going through a baby boom at the moment and have a larger number of pupils coming to our schools. So yes, of course that creates pressures. And we will continue to look for ways to do things more efficiently, more effectively, to use new technology, to use digital systems as I described in the courts. And yes, there will be some tough decisions ahead still, but we are committed to spending the extra £8 billion that the health service needs to deliver the plan that's been put together by its professional managers and to ensure it can do what is necessary for the future. And we have a track record. You've seen us in government, we've actually protected school budgets.
Chris, just briefly on what you've been saying there. You're protecting school spending, but not against inflation. That means a squeeze. It means less resources over time, depending on how inflation develops. And you mentioned £8 billion for the National Health Service. You're outbidding Labour on this, but you're telling us nothing of where that money is going to come from.
Exactly. Well, I mean, the money is going to come from the same place that the money has come from for the last 5 years. We have, even though we have been taking tough decisions, continued each year to increase spending on the health service. We think we can continue to do that and we can find the money that's necessary.
Chuka Umunna.
But from where? But anyway, look, Lucy,
we have the track record because we've already been doing it.
from where?
Well, we're spending more money every year from tax revenues by getting the right balance between tax and spending.
Well, look, Lucy, look, you asked the question. First of all, thanks very much for what you're doing. I think it's an incredible thing that you do. I've got primary school teachers in my own family, and honestly, I'm not sure I could do what you do. It is incredible what you do. And look, we are going to protect the school's budget in real terms, inflation-proof it. But going to what I said before in terms of how you spend money, yes, we should always, I think, look to spend it more efficiently, make sure every pound of taxpayers' money goes further. But the question is whether you can do so more fairly. And we think we can. So in the school's budget, should we be spending all the money that we're spending on free schools, creating school places where we don't need them? Or could we actually use that money to make sure that for 5-, 6- and 7-year-olds, we're limiting class sizes to 30, which is better for the kids, and frankly, I imagine, better for you as a teacher as well. And that's what we're going to do. Another example, something that we announced today with the launch of our manifesto, there's this outfit called the New Schools Network, which advises government on these free schools, which we give millions of pounds to. What are we doing that for? When we could actually use that to create a national primary childcare service to give wraparound care to children, both before they start school and after they finish, so that their parents can ensure, have proper care and they're getting education and assistance. Again, that's a better use of the money. So what we're trying to do is do it more fairly. With the school's budget, we protect it. And as I said, thank you for what you do, because honestly, it's a very important thing that you do for our community.
Okay. Thank you. If we could be ready for a question from the gentleman in the striped jumper near the back, and then we'll come to Ed Davey. Ed Davey.
Listen, education is, I think, the most important thing we do for our society and our economy. My background is an economist, and when you compare different countries and over different times and look at why they perform better and society is more cohesive, education is number one. And if you look at what bit of education spending is the most important, it's the bit on nurseries and primary education, because that affects children's life-term outcomes, but more important than anything else. So it is incredibly important. The reason why the coalition protected school spending was because of the Liberal Democrats. Michael Gove went to David Laws at the beginning and said, we're happy to freeze spending per pupil. And David Laws said, no, we're not. We want to keep it going up in real terms. And interestingly, the Conservatives now are proposing to freeze spending per pupil if they're elected. And Liberal Democrats are saying, no, we want to ring fence in real terms spending on nurseries, schools and colleges, because we think it's an important investment. It's a different set of priorities, different set of values. We can have argument about that, but that is ours. And we've delivered that also through a very important policy which came from the Liberal Democrats. Actually, Nick Clegg was the first British politician to write about it, and it's the pupil premium, giving more money to children from disadvantaged backgrounds, and children from black, Asian and minority ethnic communities are disproportionately benefiting from that pupil premium policy that Liberal Democrats had on the front page of our manifesto in 2010 and have delivered in government. So this is a vital area for us, and it's been vital in the coalition, it will be vital if we're part of the next government.
Okay, Lucy, what did you make of the answers that you've had so far?
Like, taking it, making it obvious to where this money's going to be taken from, and like what parts are actually going to be cut down. Because I'm a teacher, but there is policemen that all harm, there's like nurses, doctors, healthcare, firemen, and other people in the public service who will just harm as much as, say, education, if you're taking it from all these different places.
Okay, thank you. Let's get your point in the corner, sir.
Good evening. This is for the panel. The Scottish referendum was very interesting. Almost 85% people voted. Is it the party's policy now that they would like to lower the age of consent to voting to, say, 16?
Yes, that's Liberal Democrat policy. I voted for it in the House of Commons.
Chris Grayling, you don't like the idea. Why not?
I've asked this question many, many times to groups of sixth formers in my constituency. I've never yet had a majority vote in favour.
Chuka,
I've
your
asked
party
a
group.
question. I've always had majority vote in favour of votes to 16.
Well, so
Don't know who you've been talking to, but...
I've been talking to my own constituents.
All right, let's take another question on this before we move on. Madam, if we may. Just wait for the camera and the microphone before you tell us your point.
In politics, the language of principles and values is very tricky because you can always fall back on that. And so with Lib Dems, what has happened is there's obviously been a break of trust with the whole tuition fiasco. So as part of your campaigning, how do you as politicians, how do you rebuild trust? And what changes come through your campaigning then to kind of rebuild that? Because it's an issue that you have to acknowledge there was a problem and there were promises you weren't able to keep. So how do you rebuild trust?
Okay, that's a good question. You're anticipating our next question in many ways, so we'll keep that one in mind and we'll cover it in a very few moments. But while we are mulling on that, before we move on to that question, I'm going to take another one or two from the floor.
I'm going to be a first-time voter. I'm quite politically involved, but a lot of my friends aren't. And I was actually kind of interested to know from different political perspectives, who do you think is to blame for the apathy that most people feel and the fact that most people don't care about politics, and they certainly don't care about politicians? So, thank you.
Thank you, Kat. So there's the question, very straightforward question. Chris Grayling, if we may start with you.
The honest truth is there's no single answer to that. There's a whole variety of different reasons. Politicians haven't done a good enough job of explaining the importance of what we do. We have not always spent enough time getting out onto the doorsteps, into mosques and temples, to talk to BME groups, into schools to talk to young people. I think that has actually changed over the past 10, 20 years. Today's generation of members of parliament do things and go to places which our forebears would never have done. And I think that's for the better. I think almost every MP of whatever political party is very active in their community, does their best to get out and reach out to it and explain. When Chuka and I are debating the results of the conversations we've had with sixth formers in our constituencies about the age 16 vote, it's a sign that we're both actually out talking to groups of sixth formers. But it's why we're here tonight. It's why Patchwork's doing such a great job in trying to reach out. There is no simple way of doing it. It's about all of us working very hard to engage people, make people understand why it's important, and also to overcome the fact that in conventional media, we probably get less access to talk to people than has been the case for a very long time. Social media, the internet can help make a difference to that. But actually, people say, well, why don't I see more on the television of what you do in the House of Commons? The answer is, on the news programmes at night, you get a short clip. Not a lot more. A lot of people don't get their news that way now. So it is a constant battle for us to try to find avenues to communicate, to explain. And the only solution, I think, is frankly for us all to work hard as politicians, but for groups like Patchwork to also try and make a difference as well.
Chris, before we move on, Davey, next I'll ask you to give an answer. But do politicians in all parties across the spectrum recognise that it's a good thing to get in touch with the people who elect you and those who don't, for that matter? And it doesn't just have to wait till election time before that process kicks off.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it does. If you shadowed any member of parliament of any party over the 5 years between elections, you would find us around and about in our communities all the time, talking to people, doing things with people, listening to people. But of course, they're quite big areas. There's 45,000 houses in my constituency, so knocking on every door isn't something that happens in a short time frame.
Okay. Davey.
You ask who's to blame, we're all to blame. That's the clear answer. Because when I talk to people, young people, people of any age, frankly, they're not apathetic about their world, they're not apathetic about their community. There's many people who really care about all these issues that we're talking about. So we have to do a better job. And I think there are two real aspects that we've got to get right. One is language and channels. A bit like Chris was talking about the social media. I only learned a few weeks ago about Snapchat. I've never heard of it before. I'm sorry, but I hadn't. And so I've got to keep up to date with the channels and some of the language that we used. I mean, I've been hearing about this Joey Essex programme. I'm not sure if I understand everything that's said on that. So I need to understand. We used to use the language that people also use. But there is anger with politics, and I'm going to sort of take the lady's question on over there, because if you look over the last few years, there's a lot of anger with politics. People have been disappointed with what the political system have produced. I think, remember, the anger for me really started on the Iraq War, when Tony Blair didn't appear to listen, and that was a real moment when I think people got fed up with politicians. I think we saw that with MPs' expenses. People were really, really cross about the system of MPs' expenses. People were cross with the Liberal Democrats on the tuition fees. And we didn't get over the fact that we were in a coalition. We weren't able to deliver everything. We had 57 MPs, they had 306. We wanted to do it, they didn't want to do it. We could have walked away, kept our principles and values, and then they'd have governed by themselves and probably would have had a worse deal. We didn't get that message over. So, we've got to, when we anger people through failure to deliver, whether it's Iraq War, MPs' expenses, or the coalition, we've got to try and find a way of trying to explain ourselves better, but also make sure that we're responding to people's anger. So that's a long answer, but I think this is a vital question.
I don't know if I completely agree with the question, in the sense that I don't think people are apathetic about politics. What I think they're apathetic about is party politics. I mean, we've been talking about tuition fees. Just look at the huge number of protests there was against that at the beginning of the Parliament, or even just the overall austerity that there's been. There was that huge march where we had like hundreds of thousands, some people say 1 million people on the streets of London who campaigned against the whole austerity programme there has been. But I think it's party politics that people have objected to and switched off from, because it's too adversarial, it is too Punch and Judy, we do not acknowledge nearly enough where we actually agree on things, and we often sound like we're just having the battle for the sake of having it, as opposed to actually working out solutions to the challenges that we face as a country. And I think we've got to literally completely overhaul the way that Westminster works. Like, we sit in this ridiculous thing called Prime Minister's Questions, which is a complete and utter waste of time, in my view. We should abolish it and put something else in its place, which is more appropriate, because it's a circus. And frankly, most of the people who tune into PMQs are, very, very interested in politics and are going to vote anyway. It's the people who don't that I want to get involved with it. Okay. But there's just two other things. I do think John, I think you and the media have a role to play in this as well, because I think we actually need to be more honest about politics. It is not black and white. It is often grey, and you can't have everything that you want from politics, because in its nature is to work out how we deal with the kind of contradictory interests in society. And people try and pin us down and go, is it black or white? And if you go, it's grey, well, actually it makes it look like you're dodging the question, when actually life is very complicated. Just think about your own lives. And actually, we need to make sure decisions are taken closer to you, so that the power is not so remote. We actually need to give power away to people. And that means devolving and changing the way our whole system works, which is too centralised and too London located. You're probably wondering, why are you in politics, given what you're saying? Okay. We've got to change it.
Why do so few people take an interest in politics, care about politics, trust our politics? Just your thoughts on that, sir.
I think the problem is that we can't get straight answer from politicians. You see, over a few days ago, they've been asking Cameron, 12 billion cut on welfare, where is it coming from? That is a straightforward answer. He cannot answer those questions. Those are the things that are putting people off. If you are frank with people and tell them this is what is happening, they can. So it's just like you are trying to deceive people to vote for you. And after you've got to the power, you now come with the axe. It's not good like that. That's why people have been turned off.
All right,
so
thank
if
you.
you tell us
Thank you very
exactly
much.
where the money is coming from, then people can get used to that.
Okay, a bit more honesty. What would you like to say, madam?
I think that what I would say is actually young people aren't educated about politics. If you're from Africa or Asia and your mum and dad don't speak English, then you're not brought up within your family, in your house, and educated about what you guys are doing right now today, sat here. So if we don't learn it anywhere on the streets, whether that be youth clubs that actually aren't around anymore because we have no money for them, or in schools, then how are people meant to learn about what you guys do? So actually, make the language easier, make us young people understand what you're trying to say. Don't use these complex words, because we're not at university yet, some of us. And two, kind of have an understanding and be on the platform that young people speak at. And maybe you'll have some engagement from us younger people.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. Let's just go take a thank you for that. And we'll take a question from over there. Gentleman with his hand in the air.
It is unfair to blame the politician. I think the politician does a good job, but we need to realize that politics is sometimes not very exciting for young people. We need to understand and stop this blame game. There are a majority of young people, and majority of people are interested. The reason we're here, I came all the way from Bolton 3.5 hours because I was interested and I cared. And there's a lot of people like me who cared, but then there is a minority who doesn't. And I think we just kind of using that number, saying people doesn't care, and somehow it becomes people doesn't care. We should be more positive and more optimistic about the future. And I think people does care, and politicians are learning, and they're becoming more involved and more engaged with young people.
Okay, thank you for that. One more thought from the floor, then we'll go back to the panel. Yes, in the front row, madam.
The reason why, in my opinion, young people particularly are turned off with party politics, as Chuka mentioned, not only do we not trust you, right, because we have been let down numerous occasions on the fees issue, on the fact that we can't find jobs. I'm a graduate and I'm one of the lucky ones who found a job, but there's a lot of graduates who don't have jobs even though they went to uni. So we have lots of debt, have no jobs or 0-hour contracts or whatever you want to put it. But the problem is that we can't actually pick who runs the country. This is we can pick. My local MP, for example, is a wonderful Lib Dem politician. Would I want the Lib Dems to run the country? No. And I think one of the biggest problems is we are turned off by politics because we can't really decide what actually goes on. We can have fantastic people in our local communities, but on the overall level stuff, we don't have any choice. And that's why I think young people particularly are turned off by politics.
Politicians are human. We do our best. We sometimes get things wrong. It's absolutely right and proper to stand up and say, yeah, we didn't get that right, we'll try something else. But about your point, there's an old saying about the world is run by those who turn up. And I always argue, and it's the point I made earlier about voting, whether you are a Lib Dem supporter, whether you're a Labour supporter, whether you're a Conservative supporter or somebody else, get involved, make a difference, make your voice heard. We are all part of a large society where none of us has overwhelming influence, but we all contribute. We can all contribute in greater or lesser ways to get our voice heard, to influence policy changes, to influence the way our society operates. But the only way you will do that is if you're part of the system, if you vote, if you take part, if you argue, and if you try and make that difference.
We have a questioner from Brondesbury College. Could you just put your question, please? Wait for the microphone. If you could put your arm in the air, just identify yourself to us. Questioner from Brondesbury College. And just tell us who you are and then throw your question.
Will we ever achieve equal opportunity in our schools?
What do you
Different
mean?
people have different backgrounds. Will everyone be able to have the same opportunity to get higher standards in life?
And do you feel that at school at the moment, the opportunities that there are for young people within a particular school are very much affected by people's background? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I think a couple of things about that. First of all, I think, I'll be honest with you, I think things are a lot better than they were when I was growing up in the 1980s, where in particular, black and mixed race boys in my area were stereotyped. And I'll just tell you a bit of a personal story here. I was a slow starter at school, and my parents were told when I was 8 that he's not going to do very well at GCSEs, he's going to really struggle if he does A-levels, and university isn't an option. And we were told that, my parents were told that when I was 8. And frankly, we wouldn't have been the only family told that. So I think we have moved from that from the dark days of the 80s, where there was, frankly, outrageous institutional racism in some parts of the education system. But I think what we've got to do now in particular is make sure that whether you're going to go down an academic route towards a degree, or whether you're going to go down a vocational and technical route to doing engineering or some other type of technical occupation in the future, that both are given equal priority and we give equal support to people going down the different routes, and that we treat them the same. We've got to get rid of this snobbery in our country that says if you go and do an apprenticeship, it's not as valuable as doing a degree, because it is. So that's how I would answer that question. Can I just say a little something about trust, really, on the last thing? Because I think, look, it'd be really easy for me to say all these Lib Dems and Tories are a bunch of liars, and they're not. Actually, since I joined the House of Commons in 2010, when I was there, when none of us are MPs at the moment, I think most people are honest and want to do the right thing and want to improve society according to their worldview. But I think this honesty question it's where it becomes really important is if you say you're going to do something, do it. And also, we've got to be far better at joining up what happens locally down the road from you to a political decision. And I don't think we do that enough. I remember the last election, I have a conversation with one of my then constituents-to-be, and she said, oh, Labour haven't done anything in this area. And I said, well, tell me a bit about what you do. And she said, well, I work at the Children's Centre, the Jubilee Children's Centre down the road. And I said, well, you do realise that the reason we have children's centres is because my party in office established over 3,000 of them across the entire country. And she said, no. And I said, oh, yeah, and the school that your children's centre is attached to, we also made sure we put capital funding into building more schools. That school didn't exist before 1997, and that was as a result of a political decision. And she says, oh, okay. And she voted Labour in the end. But that's the point there is there are a lot of things that happen, whether it's your safer neighbourhood team, new buildings for your local health centre, that are as a result of political decisions, and actually we're not very good at pointing them up. So people just think, oh, it just happens because the NHS decided. So that on the communications front, I think that's right. And just by the way, the point that you made about people learning about politics in school, I could not agree with you more. And the problem that we've got at school at the moment is everything is being chucked into personal, social and health education. Yeah. Everything, religious study, careers, the lot.
And Chuka, one point, does your answer involve sending more power back to local education authorities? Because, to take one example, academy schools in many cases have shown an awful lot of success in improving results and performance. And that was actually a Labour initiative in the first place.
But the big difference actually between our academy system and the one that the government's got at the moment is that the government's one means that all the accountability goes straight to the Department for Education. Whereas by the time we left office, we changed the academy system so that you had local accountability and you had to think about the place of that school in the wider education community in a particular area. So we're going to put in place, by the way, one-to-one careers advice for all young people at the age of
brief word from Chris Grayling. And Chris, we've seen that free schools have been a success to you. You often see them growing up in areas, in better off areas, not in areas where there's a need for schooling, which is arguably great. So we've seen that fee-paying schools, private schools, very often have higher standards of attainment. In short, educational opportunity seems to be something money can buy. Do you accept that's true?
Well, actually, no, I don't. And I don't actually, I would reassure you on the premise of the question. If you look now at achievement between the different ethnic groups in this country, there's now very little difference between white, black, actually Asian young people do better than either white young people or black young people. And I would disagree very strongly with Chuka. He talks about free schools earlier. Labour do not want to continue to support free schools. I actually think in areas where the existing provision has not been up to scratch, why would we not allow groups of parents or a charitable group to set up an alternative school in the area? Why would we not allow the emergence
of schools that are there?
Why would we not allow, for example, religious groups? There are Sikhs free schools, for example, being set up at the moment. Why would we not allow that to happen? Why do we have to have a society where you're not able to do that? We went through years and years and years where parts of our state school system did not do as good a job for young people from minority groups as should have been the case. We now have an academy system that's working well, we have free schools making a difference, and we see educational attainment in minority groups rising all the time. Why would we want to change what is working well now?
I need to move on. Ed Davey, brief word, please.
Well, I want to explain to this lady here why she wants Liberal Democrats in government for this very reason. We in government introduced the pupil premium, which is for every child from disadvantaged background is an extra £1,320 for their education. That is already making a big difference. It was a tried and tested policy which Nick Clegg looked at in the Netherlands. He's got a Dutch mother. He brought that over because it helped the chances of the more disadvantaged children. We brought that into government. It's its early days, but there's already, certainly in my constituency, when I talk to the head teachers and the governors, they're saying it's making a difference to the most disadvantaged children in their schools. And I believe that the pupil premium delivered by Liberal Democrats in national government is going to be the biggest difference for the quality of opportunity that we have seen for many a long year, because it will actually go with the child, and so those schools who've got more disadvantaged children will get a lot more money. That's what's happening in parts of my constituency where they're more deprived areas, and those children who are in better areas but are still coming from disadvantaged backgrounds, they're getting extra money too. That's delivering a real step change in the improvement, and I'm deeply proud that Liberal Democrats in national government
I'd like to cover a bit more ground before we start to wind up. Nanaya, if we can get a microphone to Nanaya.
Are the parties afraid to make the case for multicultural Britain?
Are the parties afraid to make the case for multicultural Britain? Okay, let's start with Ed Davey.
I think multicultural Britain is fantastic. We need to build on the success we've seen of it, and I get really fed up that people talk it down. I think in Britain we have huge things to be proud of in the multicultural Britain we've done, the diversity. It's made our society richer, it's made our economy more prosperous, and people always look at the bits that need more work on, and they say, therefore, it's not working. Rubbish! We are one of the most tolerant, outward-looking, inclusive societies in the Western world, and we should be deeply proud of it. It's one of the reasons why our economy is actually successful. And one of the things I was most cross about as a minister in this coalition government was when David Cameron made a big attack on multiculturalism. He made it in Munich in a speech in the Security Council in Munich. And I think that was a shameful attack on multiculturalism. And I was really proud that Nick Clegg, a few weeks later, went to Luton, where on the same day that David Cameron had made that speech, there'd been a march by the EDL, the so-called nasty English Defence League. He went to Luton and he talked them down. He took them on and he said multiculturalism is something we should be proud of in our society. And that is my party's position, and I believe we need to show the strength and the massive advantages.
Would it carry more weight if the Lib Dems had any ethnic minority representation in the House of Commons?
We have a lot of councillors from a whole range of different ethnic communities, but we failed yet to break through at parliamentary level. It's partly because we have fewer MPs. If you have more MPs, you've got more chances. But we've been taking this very, very seriously in this Parliament under Nick's leadership. We have a leadership programme which is designed to bring on candidates for Parliament from Black, Asian and minority ethnic groups. We have employed, using party funds, for the first time ever, diversity officers to help people understand the party, to get on in the party. We've had mentoring programmes. We've taken this far more seriously than we've ever done before. I wish we were going to break through. I hope we will break through. And it's something we desperately need to do.
Yeah. Chris Grayling.
Is
it fair to say there's a tenor, a tone, which is read as being hostile to the benefits of immigration in much of the rhetoric that we hear from your party?
Absolutely not. First of all, the point is, we've actually a bit of a step ahead of the Lib Dems in that we have got a large number of MPs and candidates from minority backgrounds. There will be more elected at this election. I'm proud of that. And what's great is we're now seeing candidates from minority backgrounds being selected in our safest seats. both men and women, and that's really good news. It means that the Conservative Party will be more diverse than before. It means that we will, I think, if I remember rightly, even at the last election, we fielded more minority candidates than any other party, and I'm proud of that. And I take issue with what Ed said about David Cameron's comments. Look, to me, these are two separate issues. Now, I'm take issue with you. The issue of immigration and the issue of multiculturalism are not the same. We benefit enormously from being a richly diverse society. The people who have come to this country and their children, because actually most of the people in this room are not people who are born in other countries. They're as British as I am. And we are all British together, and we are strong together, and we are better. And we are better as a society when we are fully integrated, where we work side by side, where we live by side, where we play side by side. And if David Cameron is commenting about multiculturalism, it is that we do not want separation in this country. We want communities living cheek by jowl, working together, treating each other as fellow citizens. That is what truly an integrated society should be about. That is very different to expressing concerns about immigration. Immigration is not about race, colour or creed. It is about how many school places do we have? It's about how big is our health service? It's about how many houses do we have? You know, this is a great country to live in. There are very many people around the world who would like to come and live here, but we're a small island. And it is perfectly reasonable to have limits on immigration whilst at the same time championing the benefits of a society that is richly diverse.
Chuka Umunna, I think we all saw you casting gently accusatory glances at your colleagues from the Liberal Democrats and the Tories when that question came up. Do you, by the way, Chuka, have one of those red mugs in your kitchen, the one that says control of immigration on the side?
I don't have any of the red mugs, but let me just say something about this question. I'm really glad that it's been asked. And what I'm the first black member of a British shadow cabinet. It's not going to surprise you what I'm going to say. But, I mean, Chris, I'm not sure we'd be a multicultural society were it not for immigration. I have to say that. Although I get the point that you're making.
So you actually agree with me?
I get the point that you're making, which is that to express concern about immigration is not necessarily to be racist. But
well, not necessarily. You're saying it is racist.
Well, if you let me finish what I was going to say, which is this. Look, I think across all different communities, all different parts of society, I think all people on immigration ask for is a fair and firm immigration policy with proper controls where we don't see undercutting in our labour market. Yeah, if you come here, I think it's reasonable that we don't spend money translating documents, we spend it helping people learn English so that they can integrate, etc. I don't actually think there is any disagreement on that. But I'm sorry, I do think the tone and nature of the debate around immigration in our country, I don't mean this in relation to any particular political party, I mean nationally across this country, is disgusting. And actually, you know, we've seen it before. In the 1960s and 1970s, you know, when my father came to this country, people blamed black and Asian people for all of our problems and sought to scapegoat them. And now the current people to other are Eastern Europeans, and I don't think we should have any truck with that kind of politics whatsoever. And that is what Nigel Farage in particular is going around getting across to people. You know, here we have a leader of a major political party in our country getting stuck in a traffic jam, blaming immigrants, adopting the BNP's slogan, going around simply sowing the seeds of division, never mind the stream of racism and other prejudice that we see coming from their candidates. And frankly, the job of all the other political parties is to provide some leadership here, not tell everybody what they might want to hear, which is that because of our, you know, all our problems are down to those people over there, is actually being honest and say that the problems that we face as a country have often been because we've had generations of politicians of all different political persuasions who've made mistakes. And we shouldn't be blaming immigrants for those, we should be blaming actually the people who make the decisions in the first place. We've got to sort this out as a country, in my view.
So Chuka, if you're targeting the Conservative side of the spectrum there pretty directly, if David Cameron is pandering to a certain gallery by saying that migrants from Europe have to wait 4 years before claiming benefits, that's exactly the sort of wrong that you're discussing. If Labour then says you have to wait 2 years before you can claim benefits. Is that only 50% as bad?
Things. As I said, I do think that Chris has a point that to express concern about immigration is not racist. And actually, one of the things that I have found in the constituency that I've represented is those who've brought up the issue of, for example, when you can take out of our system and how much you have to pay in before you can do that in terms of social security are actually my black and Asian constituents. I don't think, I have no problem with people raising those kinds of concerns. But the bottom line is, with a lot of the narrative we've seen about this, and a lot of the points, there is an underbelly to this, which I'm sorry, is racism. And, what people like Nigel Farage and people in the kind of populist right of British politics ask us to do is to give them the benefit of the doubt on these issues when they have form. End of story.
We are being wound up. Time has run out. We've got more questions that we haven't got round to asking. There are arms in the air. We haven't had a chance to get involved. I've got to draw this to a close, and I'm going to do that by asking each of our panellists to take 1 minute each. I'm going to time them, 1 minute each, to just tell us all, finally, what it is they want to leave us with by way of a thought to draw us in the direction of their political party. I'm going to start, if I can, with Chris Grayling.
Well, I think I would finish really with where I started, that actually this election will determine all of your futures over the next 5 or 10 years. The difference between the options to form our government after May will be massive. Big change of direction, new policies, new approach, and you have to bear in mind it is only 5 years since we had a Labour government, and it's only 5 years since we were in the deepest financial crisis in our modern peacetime history. For 5 years, things have got step by step better. Employment opportunities have got better, the economies have got better, we've increased educational attainment, we've increased the number of apprenticeships, we've got more young people from BME backgrounds going to university. Things are moving in the right direction. Okay. This is not a moment to change direction.
Thank you, Chris. And Chuka, your minute starts now.
Well, I just want to actually answer Charity's point, which is that, frankly, where's the choice? And in all of the things that you mentioned 0 hours. We're going to ban exploitative 0 hours contracts. You mentioned tuition fees. We're going to reduce it from 9 to 6,000, saving somebody doing a 3-year degree around £9,000 throughout the course of the degree. And you talked about jobs. We will guarantee young people who've been out of work for more than a year and adults who've been out of work for more than 2 years a job if they're in that situation. No other political party is committed to doing that at this general election. That is a real choice. And why are we doing that? Because we believe that only if every single individual and every community succeeds can we actually succeed as a country. If we simply give all the benefits and the favours to the top 1% who are doing very well, and good luck to them, that is not how we're actually going to see a better, more equal, fairer and prosperous Britain. We've got to invest in everybody, not just a few people, and that's what we're offering you as a Labour Party if you vote for us on May the 7th.
Liberal Democrats exist to try to get a stronger economy and a fairer society where we can get opportunity for all through investing in education. That's what we've always stood for, and that's what we're standing for at this election again. But it's very confusing at the moment for people out there, because there are more parties, as you said at the beginning, John Pienaar, but also it's increasingly clear from the polls that no individual party is going to get a majority. So whether you like it or not, it's likely it's going to be a coalition again. And my worry is this. With UKIP on the right, the Conservatives have yet to rule out a deal with UKIP. With the SNP on the left, sowing division, I think, within the United Kingdom, Labour have failed to rule out some sort of deal with the SNP. You ruled out a coalition with ministers, but you've not ruled out a deal, and you know that. Look at the fine print. So there's this real danger that we'll have a swing to the right or a swing to the left. I don't think that's where the majority of people are. I don't think that's how you build a stronger economy in a fairer society. And that's why I think the importance of Liberal Democrats has never been greater. We have shown we can moderate the Conservatives in government. We've shown we can help build a stronger economy and make sure the recovery is fairer. If we hadn't been there, it would have been a much, much worse, believe me. And therefore, I think the more Liberal Democrat MPs you have in the next Parliament, the more it's your insurance policy against a swing to the right with Tories and UKIP or a swing to the left with Labour and the SNP.
There's a view out there that all politicians are liars and charlatans and dodgy in every possible way. It's not true. These guys, actually, I'll watch them up close and personal. They do what they feel to be a good job for the benefit of the country, and that deserves to be recognised. Beyond all of that, there's a point to politics. It's about engaging with it and taking part, watching, voting, just getting stuck in and watching this business of politics develop, because it's our politics. You know that, or you wouldn't be here. So take it out, spread the word. Remember the catchphrase, Get Involved 2015, the Patchwork motto. Tweet it out, send it out, get as many people interested as you possibly can, because again, that is the point. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.